And we're very excited, so let's welcome Jonathan Goodman to the stage.
All right, so we'll get this started. We have some questions, obviously, that you guys have posted in the Facebook group. We'll get through those. We wanted to do a couple from the crowd as well. So as we get started, you guys start thinking of questions, and we'll get some questions towards the end. But I guess basically where we wanted to start with is, John's somebody who has done a lot of different things in the industry. And what you'll notice is, I mean, he's written books, he's done courses, he's done certifications. What you'll notice is he always tends to be on the front side of things. And that's hard to figure out, right? If you're just watching him, it's like, how does he know this? And so starting off, I'd like to ask, like, what is your thought process in the sense of where you see things going? How do you start forward pacing to understand what you think is about to go on and where the next trajectory is going to go?
That's a good question. First of all, can we get the slide up? I'm very
proud.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had my first PowerPoint slide made for me that I've made in like 6 years. And Eric, this one's for you because I told him that I was going to do it.
It's getting pulled up right now. That is not the slide.
Not that
That's not the slide.
But it's coming. It's coming.
There we go.
That is actually an AI of John Goodman right there.
Yeah.
Samurai.
The most important thing that I think that I tried to do as much as possible is I try to look outside of our industry and I try to look at the interplay between different disciplines. And in doing that, over the years, I've started to gain a pretty good 80-20 understanding of a bunch of different things and how they work. And I think there's a quote by somebody who's one of my heroes. He was the VP of the Behavior Change Unit at Ogilvy, the big advertising agency in the UK. And he said the most interesting shit that happens is never in any one industry. It's in the interplay between multiple industries. Mm-hmm. And we think about this, I think about this now particularly with like AI and artificial intelligence and automation, and the only way that we're going to be able to stay ahead is to do things that you can't easily teach a computer. If you can easily teach a computer something, it's not going to be worth anything. And so even now, it's going to become way more important to basically gain enough of a knowledge about as many different things as you possibly can. And so what I'll do is I'll do deep dives into different schools of thought in a very, very concentrated amount of time. Think about how the body gets stronger. We're constantly in a state of homeostasis. And in order to get out of that state, either higher or lower, it actually takes a really intense, short burst of time or energy or training to hop up a level. But once we get to that next level, that becomes our new normal, right? Like we don't kind of grow in this kind of progressive nature. We grow in this stepwise fashion. And so I've tried to take that same kind of approach with my learning. So just to give you an example, in early 2021, January 2021, I read 9 books on artificial intelligence, but particularly how it's going to redefine job roles. And nothing in the fitness industry, nobody's written a book about artificial intelligence and redefining job roles in the fitness industry. But how it's going to redefine job roles, what skills are going to be important or not important. Like, I don't know how to code AI. I've actually never used ChatGPT. I have no interest in using it. But I have a lot of interest in understanding how our roles are going to be redefined and what skills are going to be very, very important. And so what I did is in a month and a half, I read everything that I possibly could, super deep dive in that. And then I can bring that 80-20 knowledge now and kind of mix that in with everything I did. I did that with personal finance and wealth generation as well, kind of a few months after that. And so always that's what I'm trying to do. And to make it a little bit more tangible, you have your fitness skills for sure, or nutrition skills, or sleep coaching skills. They're actually worth basically nothing. But when you can mix them with psychology, particularly behavioral psychology, marketing, sales, finance, well, then it becomes really, really interesting. And so there's the tangible thing that you do, the subject matter expertise that you have, and then there's a few, I got to think of a good word of it at some point, but there's a few kind of skills that I feel like everybody should have at some point. that no matter what you do, you're going to be able to make money and have a career and have impact. And so one of them is writing. I think writing is the most important skill to acquire. Even in this day of video, well, a video was built off of a script, isn't it? A video is based off of storytelling, isn't it? So writing actually comes first, and oftentimes captions, and even writing in terms of communication. Most communication that we have professionally these days is what's called asynchronous. So I'm talking to you guys, it's synchronous, right? You talk, I respond. I don't have a lot of time to respond. I maybe can pause for a second or two, but not much. Asynchronous, we can take as much time as we want to respond. The problem is we can't emote the same way as we do as humans. And it's very important to acquire the writing skills to be able to emote and not be taken the wrong way in things like emails, text messages, status updates, whatever, because we tell ourselves a lot of stories. So writing, I think behavioral psychology is fundamentally important to understand. I mean, change psychology comes into that as well, but human beings haven't changed. Like, social media isn't scary for me because I actually don't give a single fuck about any of the algorithms, because I understand why humans use social media. And I've been through enough cycles of this thing to know that these actual platforms come and go, and the ways that they operate constantly changes. But at the end of the day, buttons are always going to change, humans aren't. And so you got to take a step back and understand why humans use social media, and we use social media largely as an act of something called selective self-representation. We use social media because we feel like we want to appear intelligent, interesting, intellectual, attractive, or funny. And so if you can make somebody else feel like they appear that way as an extension of your own voice or as an articulation of your content, they'll share that because of how they feel it makes them feel. Now, the most important thing here is this is all perception. Whether any of you actually think that I'm smart or making sense right now is completely irrelevant to my self-worth. What matters is that I think that you think that I sound smart right now. And so the key actually, I mean, I'm guessing we're going to get into content a little bit, but the key when you're creating content is to understand that if you want your content to share, you actually basically need to say what other people already think but are too lazy to articulate themselves. And that's how you do obvious content, and then there's obvious and non-obvious content, which we can get into, because if you just do obvious content, you're basically a glorified entertainer, which is not a bad thing, but you got to understand that that's the game you're playing, and you're playing a game of trying to be an entertainer and not necessarily building a coaching business out of that. And we can talk about that if you want. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good segue, and I know you have a framework around content and content creation. So if let's dive a bit into content, because I know it's something, obviously a ton of coaches struggle with, have blocks with, even in a lot of instances end up not doing, avoiding altogether because of that. So
right. Yeah, because what do you say? It's all been said before, right? First of all, isn't the slide pretty? Look at it. How nice this is. I know. Sometimes I do design.
You designed that?
No. God, no.
Exactly.
you didn't design your slides either, Derek. So
if anybody's seen anything that I've ever done on Instagram or social media, it's just the jankiest thing ever. It's just like, I'm just going to write stuff and screenshot it and put it. And yet people all the time, like somebody this morning was like, hey man, how do you get this photo on your Instagram? I'm like, I post to Twitter and I screenshot it, and then I just crop it into a square, and then I upload that picture. That's all I do. What was the question again?
Content creation. Talking a bit about content creation. Or you can keep going down that rabbit hole.
No, I don't need to. You all make prettier stuff than I do. Content creation. I'm going to take a step back. We can get into the 4 stages of content depending on where you are in your career. We can get into that. But I'm going to take a step back before we even talk about content and talk about why you might want to do it or not want to do it, and how, and this is, I think, going to be a fundamental theme in what I talk about and what I'm really thinking about these days. There's good advice that might not be good advice for you. There's good information that might not be good information for you. And experts might be saying something that's really intelligent, that's really, really smart, that might not apply to you, and they might not even do it themselves. And you actually should not, I don't think, discredit an expert who does not follow his or her own advice. Because what people do when they really understand something is they understand the rules of engagement, they understand the ways to do things and the best practices of the thing, and then they understand where to apply that to themselves. So I talked about, after I did this like deep dive into AI and redefinition of job roles, which I did a whole hour podcast on it if anybody's interested. The podcast name is there, you can just search back. But I also did a deep dive into wealth generation. And what I was trying to do here is not figure out how to make the most amount of money as possible, because at a certain point in time, I just think that, you know, more isn't like, I don't know, man. You have 37 plates of pasta, you need a 38. like it just doesn't make a difference at a certain point for most people. It just becomes kind of a comparison game. And so I was trying to really figure out my own personal philosophy towards wealth management and life management and how to optimize that for myself. And so there was a fabulous book, one of the most important books I've ever read. I read it every year now, called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. That formed a lot of the base of my thinking. But then what I started to do was I started to look for anything that I could find where successful investors gave real accounts of what they actually did with their own money. And what I found is that basically none of them invest in their own funds. There was a jarring stat. I'm going to get the stat wrong, but you can look it up, or I can look it up afterwards to my notes. But it's something like 82% of mortgage funds of mutual fund advisors do not invest in their own mutual funds. But that's not necessarily saying that those mutual funds are bad investments. It's these people saying, for me, for my purposes, for my life, this is not the right way to do anything. Okay, taking a step back into how we're deciding our own content. There's a lot of people who will give you a lot of very, very good advice on how to do stuff on social media. If you're a trainer who has 5 clients and you need 8 or 10 or 20, you can probably confidently ignore all of it. There are games to play here. And there's a game of trying to be an influencer. There's this like fancy term now. Everybody's like, oh, I'm a creator. It's like, nah, you're an entertainer, man. You're not a creator. You're an entertainer. Like, there's nothing wrong with it, but like, what are you creating? You're dancing. Like, how many people have we seen dancing on their phone already, like just out in the street? And it's like, that's cool, but like, that's what you do. You know what I'm saying? Like you are an entertainer. You are playing an entertainer's game, which is fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But if you choose to play that game, you have to understand the rules of engagement in that game, which is you are probably going to work for free or basically nothing for many years in the hopes that at one point in the future, you'll be in this position where you have so much attention on you, where you can do good stuff. Maybe you can launch businesses or not. But the most entertainers can only monetize what they do on things like brand ambassadorship deals, advertisements. And that's why you see the majority of like influencers, they can basically only sell very, very low-cost items on fear and emotion. And this is the crux of a lot of the shit that we hate in this industry. And so you see, you know, it's like, why is this person with like 500,000 followers, like why are they promoting their coupon code for a supplement company that's not even theirs? Like, that's the best you can do? You know what I'm saying? Like, clearly there's something missing here. And that's just because that's the game. They're effectively advertisers. And again, like, there's nothing wrong with that, but if you are looking for a few clients, that is a grossly inefficient way to accomplish your goal of having 10 clients and getting 20 clients. And so there's a game of being a coach and potentially leveraging content or social media to get clients. And that game is largely predicated on trying to become a big fish in a little pond. is instead of, let me take it back a step. My wife, Allison, and I decided this past summer that we were going to try to not act our age. And so we went to an electronic dance music festival. You know how much of a nerd I am right now? I'm calling it electronic dance music festival, right? Called Veld in Toronto. And we had an amazing time. Like, we were just, you know, we got there when it opened at 2:30 p.m. Again, clearly I know nothing about this, right? So we got there when it opened at 2:30 p.m. and we just danced like fools. We were silly. But then nighttime hit, and Martin Garrix, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but one of the most famous DJs in the world comes on stage, 40,000 screaming people in this like pit that we're in, and you can't move. I mean, we're tight, and you know we're jumping up and down. And if I have to talk to Allison, I'm yelling in her ear, and she can barely hear me. The guy in front of me bumping into me, trying to balance a line of Coke on the base of his thumb, like, he could not hear me when I was yelling in my wife's ear in front. And so if you're in a really noisy place, yelling a little bit louder or a little bit more often isn't going to make a lick of difference.
Great analogy.
The secret is to find the quiet space. And online, there are an almost infinite amount of quiet spaces that you can find. The problem, though, is that social media platforms are privatized companies, well, I mean publicly traded, but for-profit companies, and their motivations, their desires, are very different from yours. And they addict, manipulate, and abuse the producers of the content. And I remember when this started, it was a platform called Periscope. And I remember before then, platforms were largely like consumer addicting, but not so much producer addicting. And then Periscope came out. And I don't know, who remembers Periscope? I don't know how much I'm aging myself. Periscope, if you remember it as a producer of information, it was like a Japanese video game. It was the first time when all of these little hearts started popping up as people were watching your stuff. And they were Technicolor, and there were beeps and bops and all these little dopamine hits from your nucleus accumbens just popping through, right? And that was when it all started. And all these platforms like, okay, well, what if we can get millions of people every single day to work for us for free to create content? Well, that'd be pretty cool. And so they all started going in that way. Like, if you actually calculate your hourly rate that you're working for, the way that a lot of people are creating content on social media, it's so far below the poverty line, it's kind of frightening. And so I'm not saying don't use it, but I'm saying the data, the analytics, the way that these platforms are made to addict you to produce content to try to compete in this huge pond. My podcast is never going to hit a best of list. It's just never going to. And I got to think now, I don't even know what my Instagram is, but I kind of feel like I've reached like the top of how many followers on Instagram I, because how many active people on Instagram at any one point in time are avidly interested in personal training? Like, it's kind of rate limiting, and that's kind of by design. But if I compare myself to what the platform wants me to compare myself, which is analytics, which are the way that they show it, well, I get caught into this comparison trap versus taking a step back. And what was it I said to you this morning? It was instead of working forwards from the solution, we got to start moving backwards from the problem. The solution is, how do I create content to get clients? The problem is, well, how do I differentiate myself and make myself the obvious choice? And maybe content, the way that I'm conventionally doing it, is one potential solution, but also maybe not. And what am I trying to accomplish doing this? And, okay. So it's cool if I talk about obvious, non-obvious content, and then the 4 stages?
Yeah, absolutely.
I told you we weren't going to get too many questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. There's obvious content, there's non-obvious content. Obvious content is largely what you see in your feeds. And you look at it, and most of the time you're like, this is dumb shit. It's just kind of repeats what we already know. Sometimes it's legitimate, sometimes it's not legitimate. But it makes you feel good to watch because we feel good as humans when we hear things that reaffirm our existing beliefs and patterns. And that's fine. I actually think there's 3 categories of content you play with. There's viral, there's value, and there's depth. But I'll break that down into obvious and non-obvious. Obvious is what you use to get eyeballs. Non-obvious is what you use to go deeper with existing eyeballs and actually create depth with them and show them that you're different and that you have a deeper understanding of this thing and that you might be somebody who can really help them solve their problem. Obvious is very, 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 very superficial. It's the type of thing where anybody who's read a magazine or could take a weekend cert would be able to say. And that's fine, right? You use that stuff because it will share well, and it will get new eyeballs on you, which then you can go deeper. And the problem is your account can't just be only viral content. You have to help people take a step forward, or you have to show people that you have a deeper understanding that you can kind of help them. Non-obvious stuff is never going to perform well in terms of engagement or analytics. But for the right person, it's either going to help them take one step forward, and the key as you're creating content is to not try to do too much. It's to help people take one step forward, because most of the people that we're trying to serve have tried and failed. You know, like Mendoza's self-efficacy, you know, stages of change. Like most people have relapsed multiple times. Our job is to keep them on that wheel and give them belief that they can achieve. And the way to do that is to help them take one positive step forward in the right direction. And so don't try to do too much. Give people one simple tip to feel a little bit better that day or do something that day where they're like, okay, I can kind of see, I can kind of make sense of this. A lot of very intelligent trainers, I think, really overestimate the importance of their advanced knowledge, whereas the reality of it is most clients already know what they need to do. And our job as coaches is to help them put the pieces of life Tetris in place. And so whatever that piece is for that person, okay, what's the kind of priority sequence? So the non-obvious stuff are things where maybe you take a lesson and you tell a story of a client with emotion and you show that there's deeper reasons why you might want to lose weight or not lose weight. The non-obvious stuff, you know it when you see it. You're like, oh, this guy gets me. This guy gets this kind of piece of it. And so I'll challenge you to dive deeper into the why and peel back the onion. You know, if you're thinking, oh, you know, I'm going to talk about the thigh gap. I don't know, is that still a thing?
Is it, guys?
Is it? Is it a
Is
thing?
the thigh gap still a
Thigh gap?
thing?
Does everybody know what that is?
Does anyone know
Explain,
what
John.
that- Yeah,
Explain what that is, John.
Shit.
You put yourself in this
You
predicament.
open that up.
You ever see those videos where those really strong women had a watermelon between their legs and they're like squeezing it and like breaking that? If you had a thigh gap, you would not be able to do that. I don't know. I mean, what was it? It was this dumb trend, I feel, where it was like some like celebrity or like media thing where women apparently were supposed to have a space between their legs. Is that right? I don't know. That was like the thing that you were supposed to have. And so people wanted a thigh gap, and then there was like hashtag close the thigh gap. I don't know. So if you cared about that, right, you could talk about that, and you could talk about how dumb the thigh gap is, and like that's your obvious, and then your non-obvious is like, okay, here's why it matters. Ask yourself, oh, why does it matter? Oh, when did I feel that way? Or when did one of my clients feel that way? Oh, how much deeper can I go here with the non-obvious? So if you want to go much deeper into this concept of obvious and non-obvious, it's not my theory. There's a book called, I believe it's Snow Leopard, and it's a book on personal branding actually for writers, but it's one of the best books on content and how to use content to actually create an effective brand versus just spitting out stuff. I think it's Snow Leopard. I don't know if it's different. I'll let you guys know afterwards. But I don't even think most people need to do content. Like, who here is trying to build a clientele? Throw up your hand.
Almost everybody.
Who here already has a full clientele and is trying to win the internet so that they can somehow magically make monies at some point in the future? God, Derek. So most people are trying to like get clients, right? And so maybe it's like content the way that you conventionally do it. I actually think you gotta win what's inside your fence before you start thinking about what's outside your fence. And that might be content. And I can give you some examples of how to use content and build platforms and how that kind of works backwards and what you might do. But also like local stuff. Rachel's presentation yesterday was brilliant. Mm-hmm. It was just like, okay, well, there's actually some obvious low-hanging fruit here that's probably all you're ever gonna need to do. And can we become way better at these day-to-day kind of business stuff of asking for referrals from our existing clients and hosting events and having like throughout the year kind of promotions that allow us to reach out to old clients or old members and invite them back in because there's an event. Like if you can get really good at that stuff, you probably never need to demonstrate a squat poorly online. Mm-hmm. At the same time though, the way that I see it, there's 4 stages of content depending on where you are in your career. And so, Eric, you remember this? Eric calls me, so for anybody who doesn't know, Eric basically runs personal training in Canada. And so he runs like all of the trainers for like the club that runs 75% of personal training in Canada, so I'm not making this up. And so he called me like 2 days before. He's like, hey, all my district managers are in town. You want to talk to them? I was like, sure. He's like, all right, see you tomorrow. So I pulled up a chair kind of like what I'm doing here, and we talked about this stuff. But it was the first time that I'd spoken about this idea that I've written about a few times. So there's 4 stages of content. There's for you, there's for your clients, there's for your industry, and then there's for the world. And so I do think it is very important to be creating content at any one point in time. I do not think that most people ever need to use content to get clients. So let me tell you my story and my application of the 4 stages. For you, stage 1, I think teaching is the best way to learn. And so as you're learning, I think it's very important to write as if you were teaching somebody else what you're learning. I started a blog called championlifestyle.blogspot.com. You can look this up in the Wayback Machine on Google. I had 1 comment in 4 years. It was from my mom on the first article. Bless her heart. And she actually signed the comment mom, which was the best part. I think there were 4 different times when I wrote the post of, hey, everybody, I'm back, and I'm going to stay this time. But what I was doing was I was learning. I didn't know it at the time. I was probably pissed off at the time. Nobody was reading it. But I was learning. This is when I was in like deep study mode early in my career. I was going home. I would eat, like I'd wake up in the morning and I'd have all my blogs in a Feedly account way back when. Again, Tony, right? You remember this. And Tony's blog was one of them, definitely, that I was reading. And anything that updated, I'd throw a flank steak and some eggs on, and I'd eat with one hand, and I'd read the blogs, and I'd read the NSCA journals and stuff like that. And I'd write articles as I was doing this. And I think that people don't understand how hard it is to write. Because when you write something for somebody else, you're forced to get out of your own head, and you're forced to see things as other people see things. If you're in a forest and you're right up against a tree, all that you can see is the bark. If you take 5 steps back, you can see a group of trees. If you walk up the hill that overlooks the forest, you can see the river on the other side. And so what writing forces you to do is walk up that hill to the other side of the mountain and see things as other people see it and analyze things as other people see it. So it helped me learn early on. And it also just, I mean, it's like anything else. Rep by rep by rep by rep. You get better at stuff when you do more stuff. How many words you got to write until you become good? How many articles have you written, Tony? Like many.
Thousands, probably.
Probably thousands, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Lee's here yet, but he might have you beat. Other than that, I don't know if anybody else would. But you get better at it over time. And then the second stage is for your clients. And so what I started to do was then I started jonathangoodman.ca, because jonathangoodman.com is some realtor jerk who took the name. So I was jonathangoodman.ca. And I wrote a blog for my clients. Basically, anytime my client would ask me a question, I would, answer that question, but then I'd write a blog post about it. And this was for my clients. At the same time, what I did is I always really liked the idea of inventing awards. And I actually think awards are really underutilized, and I think you can have a lot of fun with them. I think they're great referral mechanisms as well, because they help people improve their own status and make them feel really cool because they won an award, and then they show off, and then the award is given by you, and then it's a great way actually to generate referrals. So I created an award for my clients called the Half Badge, which stood for hard as fuck. And I made it on Microsoft Paint. I downloaded this image of the shield, and on Microsoft Paint, I just like drew in with my mouse, like HAF, and I'd print it on an 8x11 piece of paper, and I'd give it to one client each month that I deemed to be the hardest as fuckest, I guess, and I'd write an article about them on my blog. And then later on, I created an award when I started to go online. I created another award called the JUG, which was the John Award for Recognizing Greatness, which I gave to people who recognized I was great. Awards are super fun. But you can, so there was this combination of, my clients were being profiled, and then they were sharing it, and that was cool. But then I was writing answers to questions my clients were asking. And some of those started to get picked up because it was real answers to questions real clients were asking. Mm-hmm. And I was on the floor thinking about this. I remember I had an article called, Fruit Doesn't Make You Fat. And that article went super viral. Like some of those articles went, and that started to get attention then of people. So that's how I started to get Men's Health. I did some of their books. I was called one of the 24 best personal trainers you've never heard of by Livestrong, which was funny because nobody had ever seen me train anybody. Mm-hmm. But people started coming into the gym because that article ranked, that was when Livestrong was a juggernaut, before they basically cheated every way that they could cheat and then ruin their whole website and ruin the whole business. But it's a whole other story. But that's why you don't do black hat and gray hat stuff on the internet. You just do your thing day in and day out, and then people are going to cheat and they're going to have spikes and then they're going to fall off. But then Adam Bornstein called, who was in charge of Arnold Schwarzenegger's website at the time, and I started writing for Arnold Schwarzenegger, and so all of this started to spiral, but I was writing for my clients. And then people in my industry started asking me what I was doing. And so I started the Personal Trainer Development Center, and I started writing for my industry. And then I started publishing other people in my industry. How many people have I taken a picture with and a selfie and posted it to my Instagram? Throw up your hand if I've done that with you. That's like, okay, well, clearly I like that room more than
that side, yeah. This side of the room needs to find John.
Yeah, y'all can find me.
Day, yeah.
But it's so important to me, just personally, that good people get risen up on our industry. I can't stand people who share dumb shit because it shares better for them, and they're sharing dumb stuff, talking about why it's dumb, so that they can get more clout on their Instagram and talk about why dumb stuff is bad. Meanwhile, their entire platform is predicated on supporting dumb stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like, what do you want to do with this? And so every single one of you, everybody you speak to, should turn around, take a selfie, post it to your Instagram or whatever social media you use, if you use a social media, and say one good thing about that person when you post it. And just, that is how all of us will grow, and that's how we support one another. And also, it's just good Instagram networking, right? So that was me kind of leading by example, and I'm still going to be doing it, but I hope that others do it as well. And okay, so you've got for your clients. For your industry now, I started publishing other people from my industry. And then I started building a network and started speaking to people, and I started hosting little events at the gym that I was at. And I think, Tony, you were at one. don't know, was anybody else here? I mean, Miles, you attended one or two of them, I think. A couple other people here might have attended some of them. But they were, I mean, I'm talking like 50, 75 people. You know, I called up my buddies. I didn't make any money on them. They were at the gym I was working at. But I started building connections in our industry and started learning about some of the problems. So you asked about how I got ahead of like some of the trends. In 2012, I did 137 13-minute phone calls with personal trainers. 13 minutes because I wanted to do 4 an hour and I needed 2 minutes to pee. I did it again in 2014. I did over 100 9-minute phone calls so I could do 6 an hour and have a minute to pee. And all that I'm trying to learn in these phone calls are what are your frustrations, what are your goals in your career, and trying to look for some patterns. And I wasn't really looking for what people were saying. I was looking for like reading in between the lines, like what are you really trying to learn and get out of this? And so in 2012, one of the responses talked about online training. I'd never heard about it at that point. But I was able to dial down the biggest problem that good trainers hit at about a year into their career, which is trainers need to make a bit more in a bit less time with a bit better schedule. That's the problem. And so what's the solution to this problem? How can we help that? And I was like, oh, online training, like, it doesn't have to be just online. It doesn't even have to be outside of your city, but can we leverage technology to be able to get out of this kind of burnout rat race trading time for money, even just a little bit? You know, everybody then was selling 6 figures, 6 figures, 6 figures. At the same time, everybody was telling me they just wanted to make $500 to $1,500 more a month. So that first program was called 1K Extra. That's how all of this happened. I talk all the time about talking to people. People are like, hey, John, I'm trying to get clients. You know, I'm posting every day on social media, and I bought all this content, and I'm posting the content to my group, and I'm doing these funnels, and I'm funneling people, and I was like, okay, so that's all cool. How many people have you spoken to today? Like, but my funnel, and then I built this other funnel to funnel people into the funnel. I'm like, okay, how many people are being funneled into your funnel that's funneling other people into your funnel? And they're like, well, nobody, but I'm making sure. I'm like, how many people have you fucking spoken to today? And that was a lot of it. I had 100, and you know how much it sucks to have 137 phone calls that all start and end the exact same way?
My goodness.
But you learn so much when you do that. So that's how I built the initial products. And so, but it wasn't all smooth. So there was a point in 2013, I was attending a wedding of some like luminaries in like the fitness marketing industry at the time. And I was in New York City, and I was by myself, and I was split from my girlfriend, who's now my wife, but we were split for a period of time. And it was really, really hard. Like, she got pregnant, and we like didn't know whether we wanted to keep it, and it turned out she miscarried. Like, it was just like a really tough time for a lot of reasons. And we were split, and I was super lonely. And I was walking through New York City, and I was feeling like an imposter, because the website was like kind of like getting some attention, but not making that much money. And I'm going to this wedding of like all of the best internet fitness marketers like in the world, basically, were going to be there. And I'm, of course, comparing myself to them. And I'm walking by myself in New York City, and yeah, this is 2013, and I'm a super late adopter to everything, hence why my Instagram handle is It's Coach Goodman, which, if anybody's noticing, it's missing the sky comma, like it's not even like good grammar. It's just because I got there late, and like I do everything super late adopter. And so I didn't have a phone that was connected to any data, and so I was walking around New York City by myself, feeling like a loser. And it was the last day of a launch for this 1K Extra program that I put out. And it went okay, but I was like, maybe I'll go back to school. Like, this isn't quite working out, and maybe, you know, I'll go back to full-time personal training. At this point, I'd let go most of my clients. I was still training like 15 clients a week. And I was like, oh, whatever, I'll go to Starbucks. So I walk into Starbucks to connect to their internet to get Wi-Fi. This story is funny to tell now, because it's like, I went into Starbucks. And I remember I walked into Starbucks, and my phone just started buzzing. And it just went zzz, zzz, and it just kept buzzing, and buzzing, and buzzing. And I knew what it was. It was emails. It was sales notifications, right? But I didn't look at my phone yet because I'm in line at Starbucks. and I just feel it. Zzz, 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 zzz. And I get to the front of the line and I order a medium mint coffee or mint tea because I refuse to speak in Starbucks stupid made up language. and I sit down and I open my phone and I just start scrolling. $180,000.
Wow.
Just popped into my phone. And I remember that moment, not because it was the moment my life changed, when I knew that there was really something here, right? But I remember that moment because at the literal exact time when my life was changing, I was feeling like a failure and wondering whether I should quit. And I'll never forget that. And so, for your industry, right? So I built products to support my industry because that's who I knew best. And I mean, God, what have I done? I've done 11 books, I think, a couple not so good ones in there, but 11 books. I've hosted 5 conferences. I did 2 at the Toronto Convention Center. I've done 8 digital programs. I've now built a software platform, Quick Coach. I've had multiple coaching programs. Like I had a fitness coaching program for trainers. We've got 2 business coaching programs right now. And like most of it worked okay, but not great. Some of it didn't work at all, and a few of them have worked really, really well. The lesson is, I just kept trying stuff. I kept talking to people, I kept trying stuff, I kept inventing things, and when something worked, I went with it. When something didn't work, I said, well, that sucks, that was a kick in the teeth, and I left it, and I moved on. And now, 17 years into my industry, at the end of all of this, I'm like, okay, maybe now, I'm ready to try to win the internet. Maybe now I feel like I've done enough. I feel like I have enough experience. I've had enough success under my belt. I've gotten kicked in the teeth enough over the years. And I've also just like lived enough. Like I've spent the last 10 winters abroad. I've traveled 4 to 6 months out of the year, every year for the last 10 years. And, by myself, then with my now wife, and then with our first son, now with both of our sons. And that's 17 years into my career. I now feel like I can create content that like the greater world might be interested in. And I gave myself a minimum of 3 years where I'm not actively trying to sell anything to build up this personal brand platform, and I'm 1 year into it. Wow. So that's the stages of content, the way that I see it, and kind of how it works. At the beginning, like, use it to learn. Then, use it to support your clients, because even though you're saying the same thing as everybody else, your clients like you, they'll want to hear it from you. Very, very cool. Use it to support them. You'll probably hit on something that's interested. People in positions of power, particularly publishing power, their jobs are predicated on finding good people and diamonds in the rough and supporting them and bringing them back up. If you are good, they will find you. And they will support you and they will bring you up. That's what they are quite literally looking for. And then kind of let it evolve step by step, and don't worry if you miss shots, because you get good stories to tell, later on.
For sure.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of gold there. Right.
Yes.
One of the things that I like that he touched on, that we were at dinner the other night on Thursday. We had a group dinner with a lot of the speakers that were in, and one of the trends, we'd started a conversation. I think it was Kevin and Nick and Molly, and started talking about business, the business side of the fitness industry, right? And within that, a lot of trainers, coaches, they're grinders. They don't really know much about the business side, and then when they go to try to learn about the business side, they go to who? Other trainers that maybe look successful, but don't really know the trajectory or don't know where they're going. They just know they're really successful. And so one of the things he touched on is how he's staying ahead. He's going outside of the fitness industry, right? He's going out and learning things from the experts in other industries, and that doesn't mean he's necessarily pulling the exact thing in and using it the same way. He's taking the things that he knows from what the experience he has in the fitness industry, pulling that and crafting his own way. And it sounds like that's kind of how he's staying ahead, right?
There's
And
there's a lot of good like local businesses, particularly like tutoring businesses are very good businesses to learn from. There's a lot of carryover to personal training in that they're often local. There's a huge difference in skill amongst tutors and seriousness amongst the profession. Most tutors are independent and they're kind of like side gigs, but then there's also like very serious companies that do tutoring, that hire tutors. So there's a lot of carryover to it, and tutors are often very good local marketers, like tutoring companies. So they're very, very good companies to look for. Also like trades. You look at like carpet cleaners, plumbers, because it's the same type of thing. I mean, consumers are largely ignorant. And you're also very ignorant. All of us are ignorant. This isn't an insult. I'm not calling you stupid. Ignorance is domain specific. Most people are very, very intelligent in a few very narrow domains and very ignorant in everything else. And we can't pretend at anything else. And so we have to understand that the vast majority of fitness consumers are actually very ignorant consumers. Just like I had to buy a TV one time because my roommate moved out. And I went to the future shop, I went to the TV store, and the guy was like, oh, what are you looking for? I'm like, a TV. He's like, oh, cool, what do you like to watch? I'm like, sports? Like, I don't know why he said that. Like, basically what I needed was a box where pictures moved, and like, ideally in color. Like, I don't know what I need. He's like, oh, well, you know, what's really important if you watch sports, there's the pictures move really quick, so you need a big Hertz rating in order for the pictures to move quickly. And so he sold me on the TV with the best Hertz rating. I still have no idea whether that exists. I've never looked it up to this day. But if you think about what this guy did, well, I walked in. He knows that most people know nothing about technology because to me, it's like it goes to space and comes back. Like, nobody understands this shit. Like, people can recreate it. Nobody understands how it works. And so he asked me what I was going to use it for. Like, first question, what are you going to use it for? What's one specific thing? I didn't have a good answer, but you still are always going to give an answer. Oh, why are you here today? Oh, what would that mean for you? Oh, can you remember a time when you felt like that? Oh, cool. And then what you do is you take some aspect of what you can do and you apply it specifically to what they said they need. Your skill set is completely irrelevant unless you know what a client wants. Once you know what a client wants, your only job is to figure out which aspects of your designations, experience, clients, whatever, applies to that specific thing, and to show them that. And so we don't know. Like, it's the same kind of thing. You know, you're gonna get like a plumber. I don't know. Maybe a couple people here like understand house improvements. I bought a house like 3 years ago. Nobody tells you when you buy a house how much stuff there is in a house. Like, and I don't know. If there are other guys here whose wife does all of the home improvements, like, throw up your hand. It's really quite incredible how handy Allison is. But there's just a lot of stuff. And so how do you possibly hire a plumber? I mean, I have no idea whether this one is better than that one or that one. And so you can study these tradespeople and how they market, how they come to you, because it's very similar to what a personal trainer is. To the majority of clients, it is wrongly, but in their minds, this is how it is, understood as a commoditized service. And so your job in standing out and becoming the obvious choice, name my podcast, probably name my best book, keep that one. And so your job is to not try to differentiate yourself based off of like what you know. It's to understand like why people actually buy. People buy based off of trusted recommendations. Somebody they know said, oh, this person is cool. Like, I look at, it's cool if I tell you 2 stories that are like the most extreme stories I can think of.
Absolutely.
So
It's going to be good.
yeah. So a year and a half ago was a pretty messed up time in my life. We had 4 miscarriages in a row, and we were going to do IVF treatment, and we'd done all the diagnostic stuff, and just before my wife got pregnant again, so we didn't start it, and then she miscarried again, and then we were going to start IVF the next month, and 2 days before she got diagnosed with cancer. And so this came as a shock, of course. This is supposed to happen to other people, not us, right? And so we didn't start IVF. And then 2 weeks after that, she got pregnant. She didn't miscarry.
Wow.
And so we had to find a cancer doctor. She had thyroid cancer, and so it was an otolaryngologist that we had to find. That's something that exists. It's ear, nose, and throat cancer doctor. How do you find an ear, nose, and throat cancer doctor? I mean, who knows, right? So we called people that we trusted who were in professions that we thought were related. So my neighbor, we called him, he's in medicine, and we said, hey, this is what's happened. We need an otolaryngologist. Do you know anybody? And he recommended Dr. Eptikinidis, Dr. E, I'll call him. And at that point, Dr. E was the only person who mattered to us. Now, here's what I didn't tell you. Our friend Rishi is an addiction psychiatrist. He's never had cancer. He's never had thyroid cancer. He doesn't know anybody who's ever had thyroid cancer. He's never known anybody who's been treated by Dr. E. He heard he was the best. We trusted Rishi because we knew Rishi. If you actually think about it, the decision to go specifically to this guy was an objectively bad decision for something that is as extreme as my wife literally has fucking cancer. I never checked Dr. E's qualifications. I never checked his past successes. I'm sure he had a bunch of letters after his name, although I've since checked because I've written about this. And he does. I still haven't checked what they mean. They're gobbledygook alphabet soup to me. But he was the only person who mattered. Okay, that's number one. My wife had cancer. I made a bad decision choosing the cancer doctor because it was a trusted referral. Number two, our investment advisor, Ted Restefan. Well, I mean, an investment advisor is a pretty important coach in somebody's life as they gain more wealth. I mean, I pay this guy $40,000, $50,000 a year to invest my family's nest egg. Like, he's a very important person. You want to know why I hired this guy?
You don't have to ask him questions.
He sits on the board of the synagogue that my dad goes to.
Wow.
Work backwards from the problem, not forwards from the solution. It would be so irrelevant if Ted talked about financial management on Instagram. It would make no difference. I don't know, maybe he has an Instagram account. I still haven't checked. I've been working with him for 5 years. I have no idea. Right? Backwards from the problem. Okay, well, you have a service to, this is a framework that I put. It's called HOMS, which is the Human Optimized Marketing System. And if you think that's a shitty framework, you should have heard the other one. For anybody who listens to my podcast, it was even worse before. But if you have to make an acronym with the letter H in it, just know it's really hard and cut me some slack. So, and humans are very important, so you need an H in this framework. So the Human Optimized Marketing System framework has 5 steps. I'll try to remember them off the cuff. So number 1, what is it you want to sell? Number 2, why are people going to buy that thing? Who are they? Where do they exist? And how can you talk to them today? And the today is in italics, which is just gives it emphasis, because I think in words on a book. I actually often don't know how to pronounce words because I read too many books and don't talk to enough people. And so I don't know how to pronounce words, but it's in italics. And so you think about what Ted did, right? Well, okay, I have financial services. I need people with money. Where are they? Okay, well, like, sitting on a board of a synagogue is not a bad idea. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not a bad, like, he's a man of his faith. Like, the synagogue's important to him, but, like, not a bad marketing strategy. And so you think about this with what you do as well. I give an example all the time of if I owned a local gym, here is the only thing that I would do to market my gym. I would do one thing. And I think Alice and I are going to start a gym locally just because I'm kind of in this stage in my life where I just want to create businesses that I want to see exist in the world, and it's just fun. Like Quick Coaches like that. Like, I didn't need to start a software company. I just thought that something like that needed to exist in the world. We need a low barrier to entry, simple, free tool to deliver professional programs to our clients. Like, that needed to exist, and I'm just going to build it because it's fun. And it's been hard, but it's been super fun and rewarding. And so if I was going to build a gym, here's the only thing that I would do to promote it. I live in Etobicoke, which is technically a part of Toronto, but it's like the township of Etobicoke. So I would create the Best of Etobicoke podcast. Now, this is not John's Awesome Gym in Etobicoke podcast. This is the Best of Etobicoke podcast, where I'm featuring and telling the stories of the leaders and the trailblazers thrusting the township of Etobicoke forward. And I would do a few things with this podcast. The first thing that I would do is I would call up the CEOs and the owners of the small to medium business, no like large businesses, but the small to medium businesses. Now, if I were to call up the CEOs and the owners of the small to medium businesses in Etobicoke, and I would be like, hey, what's up, I'm John, I own John's training business, I want to give you a discount for your stock, click. Hey, this is John, I want to do a lunch and learn for your people. Because if you ask somebody for business, they're going to give you advice. But if you ask them for advice, they're going to want to do business with you. So imagine now if I call up the same guy and I say, hey, what's up there? This is John. Look, I run the Best of Etobicoke podcast. We tell the stories of the leaders in the township of Etobicoke. I'd love to tell your story. Can I get an hour of your time? Probably give me an hour of your time. Now, you and I have had a one-on-one conversation, eye to eye, that's probably a more in-depth, serious, connected conversation than you've had with anybody, including your spouse, that month. So we have a connection, right? Now I also get free business mentoring, by the way. But now you and I have a connection. And by the way, this podcast is sponsored by my gym, of course, so there's interstitial ads. And you're the perfect client for my gym. At the end of it, I'm going to ask you to be introduced to 2 other business owners. So now you're referring me to 2 other business leaders for me to talk to locally. And you're the perfect client for my gym. But even then, you'll want to share this because there's this joke where a lot of successful authors want to have big businesses and a lot of big businesses want to be an author. Yeah. It's like everybody these days who runs like a big business seems to want like the status on social media of like running a big business, and everybody who like has status on social media has no business, and they're like, I want to have a big business. Yeah. And so oftentimes, particularly locally, you will probably be the first person who's ever interviewed them. Probably the first person on a podcast. What can you offer these people? Whenever you reach out to anybody, I think it's important to think, what can you offer them that they want deep? In this case, I think it's status, right? It's the ability to tell their story. So that's pretty cool, right? But here's what gets really, really cool. Is in Etobicoke, there is a completely misplaced, yet simultaneously perfectly placed Turkish cafe. I don't know why it's there, but it's wonderful. It's got amazing Turkish coffee, Turkish delights. The guy who runs it, like real Turkish sausage, like I have no idea how it got there, but I kind of want to know. So I'd go in, because I go in there sometimes. So I'd go in and I'd ask to interview him for the podcast. And I'd get a story, and I'd put it on the podcast. And then what I'd do is I would print out hundreds of cards. It cost me like $5. And the cards would have the title of the podcast episode, which would probably be, how the heck did a Turkish cafe end up in Etobicoke? It would have his face. It would have a QR code to listen to the episode, which would take people to my gym's website, which hosts the episode links, right? And I would give it to him, and I would say, hey, man, look, I loved hearing your story. And I never knew it. Now that I know how much you care about this stuff and what went into this, I want to keep coming back. And I think other people would too. Tell you what, you obviously don't need to, but I printed out a whole bunch of these. Why don't you staple these to the receipts of everybody who comes in? And so you do that with the Turkish cafe, you do that with the local pub, you do that with the local restaurants. Now you have like basically all of the like great local businesses promoting their episode of your podcast. You'd fill your gym in a month. Yeah. Like I do 5 podcast episodes a week. That's all that I would do. Wow. And so that's an example of just using media, but you're never going to you're never going to hit the charts, you're never going to get a lot of listeners, but I'd rather have 200 listeners in Etobicoke of wealthy business owners in Etobicoke than 10,000 people who are somewhat interested in fitness who listen to my podcast and Huberman Radio telling them that they should breathe through their nose today and then go out in the sun and then take an ice bath, and then it's really important for you to walk but here's how you avoid hiccups, because hiccups are clearly a big fucking issue. And then it's like, how do you compete with that? If you're competing on media and on quality of the quality of your ability to do media against these like podcasts or Instagrammers or TikToks, you're quite literally competing against full-on recording studios at this point. Like, I don't think people understand how many folks are involved in these productions. And so how do you beat Michael Jordan? You don't play basketball. Don't play their game. Play your own game. You can use the same media as them, but you can use that and you can have this little pond and you can be the biggest fish in that pond. And then as you do a good job, it starts to expand out maybe, but it probably never needs to.
Yeah.
Like,
It's awesome.
Yeah, no, I love it, and what resonated and took away was the specificity of like learning from other industries, even locally, and looking at. And I remember actually, I don't know if I heard this on a podcast, and you were talking about gardening or some form of gardening that
I have
you were going to do.
I have a Toronto urban vegetable gardening coach.
Yeah, exactly, and just how You had this very specific thing that you were trying to do. I have no idea how to do this. I need a coach for this. And you searched for it, and this guy.
Well, I'll tell you the story.
This guy came up, but
so I decided I wanted to like grow a bunch more of my own food, and we have kind of like a difficult property. We have like a big property, but it's kind of like odd shaped, and we have a bunch of old trees because my one non-negotiable when I bought a house was at least one really old tree, because to me that's the one thing you can't buy or cheat in any way. It's just an old tree, and it's beautiful, and we love it, and we have a swing, and I sit under it in the summer for days, and it's just amazing. And so we have a number of old trees, and so the sun is actually really difficult on our property, and also the trees just like, I mean, we're talking 100-plus-year-old trees that just, the roots go everywhere. So I wanted a coach to like help me with Toronto urban vegetable gardening, I guess. I didn't know that term at the point. And so we have a neighborhood Facebook group, and I put it in the Facebook group. I was like, hey, does anybody know anybody who can help with this? And somebody responded, and they said, hey, you should check out the Spruce website. It's really, really great for this stuff. So I click on the Spruce website, and right at the top, there's a banner, and it says, 1,500 articles, 20,000 pictures, this many. And so I click on one of the articles, and I copy and pasted the words, and I checked how many words, and it had over 2,000 words. So I calculated, ballpark, that it would take me 14.1 days of continual reading to read this website. And at that point, I just closed the website thinking, ain't nobody got time for this shit. And I just hired a coach, and the next day for $270, Luai was at my house testing the soil quality, talking to me about what I like to plant, looking at the light, and helping me with it. Wow. And this is also why I think that, so the book that I'm writing, the timely yet timelessness aspect of it, has to do with automation and artificial intelligence and where technology is going. I think there's three factors at play. Number one, it's already overwhelming content. Holy crap, that's going to exponentially increase. The amount of stuff that's going to be put out there with artificial intelligence is going to be ridiculous. It is going to go so fast, I think it's going to be an impossible problem for any algorithm to ever figure out. That, again, this is why you need to create your own little pond, because the big pond is just going to get so freaking big. And also, I don't know if any of you have seen anything with deepfakes, but like, this shit's scary. There was a deepfake where they did it as an example, but you could do it not as an example. And so it was to promote like penis pills, and they were just like really funny named. It was like Erecto Large, like 16 or something. It was just like a funny name for penis pills. But it was Joe Rogan and Andrew Huberman on a podcast talking about how good these penis pills were and where to buy them. And if you really looked, you could tell that it wasn't actually them, but like, you'd have to really look, and you would be seeing that outside of context of, hey, look what can happen. It's going to be frightening what's going to happen with content. So number one, I think the trust, if you don't already know somebody, I think the trust amongst people on the internet is going to bottom out so freaking fast. I think the overwhelm of information is going to just increase so freaking fast. At the same time, 39% of Americans are afraid that they're going to lose their jobs to automation. I think it's going to be higher than that. Now, this is no different from any technological revolution, right? Like, computers were going to eliminate jobs. The internet was going to, and jobs don't get eliminated. They morph. They transmute. And so that's why the redefinition of job roles is important. But a whole bunch of people are going to be out of work, right? And then you're going to have a whole bunch of people who do work that's jobs are just going to get to be really easy. And so the people who have money that are in work jobs, they're going to be pursuing more nerdy obsessions than ever. Then you have all these people who are out of work that are going to become side giggers and consultants and coaches that are going to become the coaches because they've always had these nerdy obsessions. Like, Lawai has an engineering degree and works in business development for a multinational corporation. Well, no, now he's a full-time Toronto urban vegetable gardening coach. The rate at which this is going to happen, because you're going to have all these people like Lawai that are going to be serving these folks who have these nerdy obsessions, right? And so I think we're actually going to be entering into the age of the coach. I think that coaching will be one of the most prevalent professions moving forward because a lot of people are going to say, ain't nobody got time for this shit. But also, there's just not a lot of trust. And so acting like a dancing monkey on the internet is not how you build trust, right? Trust is built based off of personal referral, reputation, and connection. And that starts with either people you know or an uncommon commonality. Can I tell you one more example?
Absolutely.
Before we move on?
Of course.
I told you we're not getting any questions. So I have a mentorship, and I do hot seats every 2 weeks where basically like 4 people come on, and they're usually volunteered by their success coach, and they come on in 15 minutes. We just do like a super deep dive into something they're struggling with. And so somebody didn't show up to the last one. Something came up last minute. So I called on Christina last minute. I used a different name for my podcast, but Christina was her actual name. And so I called on Christina last minute, and she wasn't ready, and she was 2 weeks brand new to the mentorship. So she was super nervous. So she was, on Zoom, like you kind of see people, and they're like slumped back, and like low energy, and that's why I called on her, because I was like, I'm gonna get her. And so I called on her, and she said, she's like, I'm a little bit like stage fright right now. I said, okay, cool, like what's going on? She's like, oh, I just put out my first 4 pieces of content. I was like, that's amazing. Like first of all, I want to celebrate that. Like that's admirable. She goes, yeah, but I don't really know what I'm doing, and I feel like it's kind of all for naught, and I don't really know why I'm doing it. So for context, Christina and her partner ran 3 CrossFit boxes, and they actually won Best CrossFit Box in their town. They're from Wappingers Falls, New York. Apparently that place exists. It's a funny name, though.
Does, yeah.
There you go, Mike. You know what that is? I don't know why Mike's here. He retired. Okay, so they had the best CrossFit studio there, right? And they condensed it to 1, just to save costs, and they wanted to build an online program to expand. And what they found was that it's way harder to build online than they anticipated. Because what they didn't take into account was that they had built their reputation for a decade plus in their town. Online, they're just another fitness account. And so I was like, cool. What's your nerdy obsession? She's like, what? It's like, is there anything outside of fitness or nutrition that you are like unjustifiably obsessed with? And she goes, yeah, astrophysics and cosmetology. And so I was like, all right, cool. Okay, so I think I saw a comet last week, but I'm not exactly sure. We were on the beach at night looking for this green comet thing, and we saw this thing fly across the sky, and, one of the other guys on the beach said that he thought that it was an alien, but I'm pretty sure that he was on drugs, because there's a lot of spiritual people on the beach in Mexico that I think are on drugs on night, so I don't really believe him, but, here's what it looked like. It was like this string of lights going across the sky, and she's like, oh, no, that was the jet propulsion from a launch in Pasadena. It was going south to north, right? And I was like, yeah, it was going south to north. She's like, yeah, that was the jet propulsion trail from a launch in Pasadena that just happened. And I was like, okay, well, that's really cool. First of all, my son's going to be really disappointed. But that was really cool that you knew that. But also, did you see what just happened there? She's like, yeah, I got excited. I was like, you got to let your geek flag fly, man. This is your thing. And so later, I didn't think this quick on the call, but later I wrote up this section. This is going to be a section in the book. But I was like, here's what you need to form. You need to form the Space Nerd Athleticism and Sexification Agency, SNASA.
SNASA.
And when you do this, your snastronauts, here's where you're going to find them. You're going to find your snastronauts these few ways. You're going to look for YouTubers and stuff like that who are like space geeks, because you already follow all this thing. You're going to reach out to them. You're going to offer to train them and reach out to them. That's like the long-term play. The short-term play is you find communities and Facebook groups and stuff like that. Same type of theory. If you ask people for business, they'll give you advice. If you ask them for advice, they'll do business with you. You're like, all right, I run SNASA. It's the Space Nerd Athleticism and Sexification Agency. What we're trying to do for our astronauts is we're trying to find funny names of common exercises. I need your help, okay? Here's a couple exercises. Can you help me find names? Okay, here's the ones we have so far. Glute thrusts are called Big Bangs. And so now all these people are like naming her exercises for her and like ridiculousness. And then, of course, that's farming interest because, I mean, in any community, you have people who like want health and fitness.
Absolutely.
So that's a way to like get into those communities. Next, okay, well, every time there's a launch upcoming that's like a big deal, you go to the publications and you create a workout themed to that launch for those publications. That's all you do to build SNASA. And so this idea, so she hasn't done it yet, so I don't know about the success. But like that's an example of what's your nerdy obsession? Let's let your geek flag fly. What is your 1%? Where's your small pond? How can you stand out in the internet, right? Still on the internet. And then once you do that, well, that's vision. You know what I'm saying? Now, think of how easy that was to work backwards and figure out exactly what to do. And more than anything else, and here's where the rubber meets the road, now you got horse blinders on, and you're not falling prey to the nonsense advice that's good advice for other people, that's nonsense for you, that you're going to get distracted by on the internet because you have vision. The amount of anxiety that forms from not knowing what you're doing, the secret to working more, or the secret to doing better is not to work more, it's to figure out what not to do and to stop doing it. The problem is that even if you stumble upon the right thing to do, if you don't know it's the right thing to do, you're not going to be able to identify it. You're still going to have anxiety. You're still going to jump off to something else. When you work backwards from the problem, you have that vision. And you're like, all right, here's where I'm executing. SNASA.
SNASA.
One thing that
love
I was going to ask prior to that, and you it actually kind of is a good segue, and you kind of just alluded to it with in terms of bringing out your inner nerd or what component you resonate with maybe outside of fitness that you can
like we're all dorks
that you can tie that to, because I think a lot of these things are predicated. And, when I was talking yesterday morning, and I actually polled the group here, there was, I would say, at least half the group, if not more, when I asked how many of you feel that you're really working with and speaking to your people, like the people that you're designated to work with, that best,
I wasn't here for that. I must
that are best served by your unique abilities and your experiences that they can relate to, right? And like I said, half the group felt like they hadn't quite figured out who that was or how to figure out who that was, and even maybe for the other half, they might be in a place where they're not quite sure that they are speaking to the right people, right? So even if all the components of content creation and everything else, where you're trying to be very specific, right? Locally, but I guess it'd be more of a situation for someone who's working hybrid or working in an online model to know if you're really in the right place in terms of if you're creating content and we're saying obviously know who you're speaking to, like be strategic with who you're speaking to and create the content for them. But I guess for coaches that maybe don't know who that is, or in a situation where they're working with a group of individuals that they're not sure if that is the right fit for them, and how they can maybe go about figuring that out. Or
so I don't know the answer to your question, but I could give you a bit of a process to work backwards from it. Somebody else I spoke to in one of these hot seats, one of our students, he was like I'll call him Chris for no other reason than I just forget his name because I'm a jackass. And so Chris, he he said, you know, I had a launch, it went okay, but like not great. And I'm thinking of changing my avatar, right? What do you think? Should I change my avatar? Because I focus on training men, but 4 women signed up to this last launch and no men. So should I change my avatar to women? And I said, I have no idea. And he said, you know, I spoke to a couple of my friends, and they said, like, women buy more training than men do. And you gave Molly gave the stats. And it's like, yeah, they do. I mean, that's true. Like, I mean, men are just bad at asking for directions. Like, it's just, I hate myself for it. I walk around in circles for so long. And then my wife finally gets frustrated and asks directions, and I pretend I'm, like, on my phone or, like, not paying attention because, like, I don't want to make it look like I need the directions. Like, we're just stupid. Like, men are stupid. And so, yeah, I mean, that's probably true. But there's still a lot of men who hire coaches. So to say I'm going to change because, like, fewer men hire coaches, like, that, fine, but, like, there's enough. You know, like, you need 30 clients. Like, there's enough men to make up your 30 clients. So I don't know what the answer is. Tim Ferriss, I remember way back when he was just a lowly blogger like the rest of us. And I remember on his blog, one of the things that he said years back was the secret to successful blogging, and I still think this is the secret to successful content today, is to write something 10% of your audience is going to love and 90% won't care about, not something 80% will kind of like. Mm-hmm. And then you just rotate that 10%. And so few people do this. And so my answer to you is, I don't know what the answer is. My answer to Chris, that's what I call him, right, Chris? My answer to Chris was, okay, cool. Well, I don't know what the answer is, but you have male clients and female clients, because you had clients from before. Why don't you ask them all, your male clients, your female clients, what their biggest questions were, and, like, ask why a few times, like, get into the nuts and bolts of it. Okay, cool. Create a piece of content on each of them and keep track of whether it was a female or a male who asked that question. Create content on them and just take in data points. Like, you don't know the answer, I don't know the answer. We can all make up nice sounding stories, but it's all going to be nonsense. Mm-hmm. Right now you have n equals 4. Like, that's not a study. Right. And so can you go out and get data? And so whether you're following Chris, we'll call him Christian, whether you're following Christian's format or like the Tim Ferriss thing where you do 10% people, like, if you don't know what this is, my suggestion is to not do the generalized, I mean, look, that story that I told on the Best of Etobicoke podcast, I told for the first time on a gym owner's podcast that nobody listens to, because nobody listens to generalized podcasts about anything. I mean, it's like if you're going to play the podcast game, it's different. So we have a couple people now that are running out these types of podcasts, and it's really cool. One of my mentorship students asked me, he's like, oh, should I do the Best of Ireland or the Best of Limerick? Mm. I guess Limerick's in Ireland, yeah. Mm. And I said, there's no objective right or wrong answer to this. The difference is, if you do the Best of Ireland, you are playing the game of a podcaster. You're trying to grow the biggest podcast possible. You are a podcaster, right? If you're doing the Best of Limerick, you're using a podcast to grow your business. They're both fine. There's nothing wrong with either. But they are completely different games with completely different time frames and actions and monetizations and rewards and odds of success. I think there's a way better odds for success than for sure. Best of Limerick. And so, and also, I mean, this goes into like the financial stuff, which is where the interplay becomes really interesting. So when you understand compounding, you understand like wealth management, you realize how important it is to get cash up front and invest it appropriately. And the earlier you can get cash, the better. And so for Christmas every year, my wife's family, we give each other lottery tickets. I don't know why, it's just fun, it's the only time we do it. But I got a cash for life lottery ticket this year. And I was interested, I was like, all right, so what does this mean? Like cash for life. How much do you get? Do you actually get cash? So I looked up the rules, right? And so, yeah, you get $1,000 a week for the rest of your life, or you can take $1.4 million today. So I did some math. I said, okay, I'm 37. So if I live till I'm 87, I got 50 years. can't remember exactly what the numbers were, but it was something like $2.7 million that I would get if I got $1,000 a week. Okay, if I took that $1.4 million today and I invested that, compounding at 7% a year annually, you wanna know how much money I get in 50 years? It's like 34 million. So when you're thinking about this game, this is why I love coaching so much. Coaching is, when done right, coaching businesses kick off about as much profit as any business on the planet. If you're smart with that money, you can take that money today and invest it well. And the earlier you have that money, the faster it will compound. Warren Buffett, the secret to his success is not that he's a great investor. The secret to his success is that he started investing when he was 10 and didn't stop. It was, he has like 81 point, I can't remember the exact numbers. You can look it up. Morgan Housel talks about this. He has something like $84.5 billion when this was made, and $84.1 billion was made after his 70th birthday. Like, it's just, like, it's all because he started early. So when you're thinking about this stuff with content too, again, there's nothing wrong of doing the best of Ireland. There's nothing wrong in trying to be an entertainer and a content creator, but cash for life. Are you gonna take that cash up front and invest it well? Or are you gonna play a game where you hope to do really well in the future? And even if you do, you might still be worse off if you're smart with your money today and actually invest your money today. I see all these people, you know, oh, I need to create passive income and scalable income, so I'm gonna do a low-end membership site and I'm gonna do ebooks. And I'm like, all that shit is stupid for the majority of trainers. You're basically generating customers for the same amount of money and trouble and effort and making way less money from them. And you have way fewer resources to actually solve their problems. If you want to create passive income, take the money you're making in coaching, invest it into stocks. Like, that's your passive income. And so I don't know, we could talk about that in my hate for membership sites for the majority of people. Because I've had 3 7-figure membership sites, and I shut them all down. I don't know, what else do you want to talk about?
Should we,
Yeah, I think we
done?
took close. Yeah, that's been the easiest interview I've ever done.
for sure.